For Lurleen, campaigning was a new experience somewhat for her, campaigning for herself. Although she had campaigned with her husband George throughout Alabama when he ran for successive offices. But in that time period, both for Evita and for Lurleen, women campaigning was very unusual. Women just did not do much campaigning to help their husbands. Mostly they stayed at home. So for Lurleen, when she ran for office, by the way, her nickname, they called her Lean, and her other nickname was Mutt. Her father always called her Mutt. So when Lurleen campaigned, they had a whole entourage. It was like sort of like a Willie Nelson roadshow. They had a flatbed truck, and they had pickup trucks, and they had a station wagon, and they would go around to these small towns in Alabama and just pull up at the courthouse in a cloud of dust and unload their stuff. And of course, television was not as much in use then as it is now. There was television, but it wasn't watched as much. And that was entertainment in the town when they came to town. And they had a country western band that just belted out the music. And first, Lurleen would come on, and she would read very thoughtfully from a 10-minute speech, and it was rather colorless. And then George would come out. And no matter what you think about George's, or anyone thinks about his inappropriate views, he was a great speaker, and he would just preach hellfire and brimstone. Boy, you could feel the heat coming right up into your toes when George Wallace came on there. So he was always a very polished speaker. Well, George got sick. During Lurleen's campaign, George got sick several times. He fell by the wayside, and Lurleen had to go it alone. And so she got comfortable, and she started being a great speaker. And when George came back, he didn't know that. He came back on the trail with her, and she would keep speaking. She was only supposed to speak for a short time. So George, they have pictures of him doing this, he would reach up and pull on the hem of her skirt. And the audience just loved it to see George pulling on Lurleen's skirt to sit down. And so at one point, Lurleen turns to him and she says, "George, when I am finished, I will let you know." So it was a great experience for Lurleen. She sort of came into her own. With Evita and Juan went on a train. Argentina, of course, is a huge country. It's 5 times the size of France. So they went on a train all around Argentina. And Evita, having been a radio actress, everybody knew her in the small villages. So they came out to see her. And they just loved her. She was this glamorous, wonderful person who came to their small village. And Juan got very exhausted, as George did, and so Juan hired a railroad employee to sit in the front of the train and wave as people went by. But the campaigns were the time that both Lurleen and Evita really came into their own. They turned out to be wonderful experiences for both women.